At the dawn of the modern world, one man asked an unsettling question: what if you are not in control of your own mind? He was a young man driven by fear, ambition, and a hunger for greatness. Born into poverty and shaped by desire and doubt, he set out to uncover what the human mind tries hardest to hide. This is not just the story of a theory. It is the story of a man who turned his own inner chaos into a revolution in thought. This is the story of Sigmund Freud, a man who dared to look inward when the world was obsessed with machines, progress, and reason. It is a story of ambition, obsession, forbidden ideas, and the birth of the unconscious. In this episode, we explore how Freud's turbulent life, restless mind, and personal struggles gave rise to one of the most disturbing and influential ideas in human history. Welcome to the strange life of Freud. This podcast discusses real-world cases and psychological phenomena related to early childhood trauma, child abuse, and various psychological conditions. Some listeners may find these topics emotionally distressing. Listener discretion is advised. The content is provided for educational and informational purposes only, aiming to explore Freud's life and examine how his experiences influenced the development of his theories and contributions to psychology. At the turn of the century, during Freud's lifetime, the world was an extremely vibrant place. Research explored themes such as radioactivity, radiation, bacteria, evolution, and more. In other words, at the forefront of inquiry was the question, are there any invisible mechanisms that influence us? That very question became the center of Freud's research. His life was surrounded by a mystical atmosphere due to the turbulent times just before the First World War. Those years were marked by change, discoveries, and the Industrial Revolution. But Freud was concerned with something invisible to the human eye, the unconscious, which influenced human behavior and development, just as Darwin had proposed for the theory of evolution. Freud developed a theory that changed psychology and even the way we think and feel about ourselves. He also changed the way we talk about our psychological states and phenomena. We use his terms such as rationalizing, repressing, and so on. We are not masters of our own house. Our lives are determined by unconscious forces we are unaware of. This idea completely contradicts and even challenges the belief in human rationality and free will. But where did all his ideas come from? After all, much of his work delved into the darkest and most unsettling corners of the human mind. So, was there a reason for this fascination? If you want to explore how Freud's own mind and inner restlessness shaped his theories, buckle up. We're in for a fascinating look at the strange life of Freud. Sigmund Shlomo Freud, better known as Sigmund Freud, was born in 1856 in a rented room in the rural town of Freiburg. According to an old anecdote he later heard, a peasant woman supposedly told his mother at the moment of his birth that she had brought an important man into the world. This kind of small-town prophecy gains meaning only in hindsight, but it lingered in Freud's imagination. In 1859, after his father Jacob's business failed, the family left Freiburg. During the train journey, young Freud briefly saw his mother naked, an incident that would become unexpectedly significant in his later theories and writing. The family eventually settled in Vienna, in the cramped and impoverished former Jewish ghetto. They moved 6 times in 15 years, living in small, poor apartments, while Jacob struggled to find stable work and relied heavily on support from relatives. Freud grew up in this atmosphere of constant financial worry, and the fear of poverty stayed with him for the rest of his life. As the eldest of 7 children, he quickly became his parents' great hope. He was an excellent student and the undeniable star of the family. His mother even ended his sister's piano lessons after he complained they disturbed his concentration, an early sign of how much weight his ambitions carried at home. While Vienna blossomed at the end of the 19th century, its population booming, grand new buildings rising, and bourgeois pleasures flourishing, Freud kept his distance from the city's carefree social life. He avoided entertainment, parties, and romantic distractions, dedicating himself entirely to his studies. What drove him was very different from the amusements of his peers. He dreamed of fame. His fear of poverty sharpened this desire, and he longed not just for success but for wealth and recognition. This hunger for achievement, so intertwined with his childhood circumstances, would later become a crucial element in both his personal life and the development of his groundbreaking work. In 1877, at just 21 years old, Freud was eager to make his mark in science and began studying brain anatomy under his professor, Ernst Wilhelm von Brücke. He was the first in a long line of older, accomplished, authoritative men whom Freud deeply admired and sought to emulate before eventually discovering his own independent path. As you will see later, Freud had a strong need for a relationship with an older, powerful figure, someone he could idealize, rely on, and share his developing ideas with. Freud's feelings toward him were a mixture of admiration and fear, reminiscent of the awe one might feel toward a strict father. But von Brücke's worldview was firmly rooted in biology and the natural sciences. He believed that feelings and thoughts could ultimately be found hidden in the gelatinous tissue of the brain, and that only explanations grounded in chemistry and physics were valid. Human experience, in his view, was reducible to natural laws. Freud, however, felt increasingly drawn to ideas that could not be confined to strict biological mechanisms. He wanted to explore human experience in a new, broader way, one that broke free from purely physiological explanations. At the age of 26, he made a decisive break and left laboratory science behind. Around this same period, when he was about 26, Freud fell deeply in love with Martha Bernays. He sent her roses, their relationship blossomed quickly, and before long they were engaged. Their letters were filled with romance. His long, ardent messages, matched by her equally affectionate replies. But there was a problem. Freud was too poor to marry her, and he lacked the financial stability needed to support a family. Desperate to marry Martha, yet unable to provide for her, he made a major life decision. He would become a doctor, setting aside his earlier ambitions of forging his own research path and methods. For 3 years he worked at the Vienna General Hospital, moving through surgery, psychiatry, and various other departments, still unsure which specialty he would ultimately choose. During this time, Martha moved to Hamburg, Germany, and the two maintained their relationship through his long, passionate letters. Martha was his first love, and ultimately, she became his last. Around that time, Freud turned his attention to a then poorly understood substance, cocaine. At the time, it was known primarily as an anesthetic, and its addictive potential was not yet recognized. For Freud, the drug produced bursts of energy and lifted his mood so dramatically that he became convinced he had discovered a kind of magical elixir of life. He took cocaine whenever he felt depressed, and soon began prescribing it not only to himself but also to patients and friends. He even sent some to Martha, the love of his life. Freud genuinely believed that his experiments with the drug might make him wealthy. He thought he had found a remedy that could transform lives, but this hope was short-lived. As other scientists began to uncover cocaine's addictive properties, the idea of profiting from it quickly collapsed. Freud continued to use small doses for a while, but he never became addicted and eventually stopped taking it altogether. In 1885, Freud traveled to Paris after receiving a prestigious scholarship to study under one of the most renowned neurologists of the era, Jean-Martin Charcot. Charcot quickly became another one of those charismatic, influential men Freud admired, a pattern that would recur throughout his life. Working with Charcot proved to be one of the most formative experiences Freud ever had. During this period, he began to investigate the hidden mental forces operating outside conscious awareness. He started to understand that the mind is layered, consisting of both conscious and unconscious processes, a realization that would later become central to his theory. Charcot's patients presented Freud with a puzzling and fascinating challenge. Many suffered from hysteria, a complex condition marked by an array of unusual symptoms, such as stuttering, tics, motor impairments, sudden rigidity, fainting, difficulty swallowing, numbness, and dramatic physical postures such as arching backward in bed. Strangely, none of these symptoms had any identifiable organic cause. Patients might be unable to walk one day, recover mobility the next, and then become paralyzed again shortly after, patterns that clearly defied any physical explanation. Because doctors at the time could not find a biological basis, many assumed these patients were simply faking. Hysteria was considered incurable, and those diagnosed were often sent to psychiatric hospitals, where little more could be done. The condition posed one of the greatest medical mysteries of the period. For Freud, however, this mystery sparked a new and powerful idea, one tied not only to scientific curiosity, but also to his deep personal ambitions. If he could uncover the true cause of hysteria, he could achieve the fame, respect, and financial security he longed for. Solving this puzzle might allow him to marry Martha and build the life he envisioned. After completing his work with Charcot, Freud returned to Vienna with a new fascination. He no longer wanted to study the brain itself, but the workings of the mind. He opened a neurological practice focused on physical and nervous disorders and finally managed to save enough money to marry Martha. The two wed in 1886, and over the years, Martha gave birth to 6 children. Yet Freud remained preoccupied with the unresolved mystery of hysteria. Under Charcot, he had seen that hypnosis could temporarily ease symptoms, such as paralysis and tics, but the effects vanished as soon as the patient woke from the hypnotic state. Hypnosis, however, was widely dismissed at the time, viewed as little more than stage magic or trickery. Freud wanted a more respectable method. He experimented with what he called electrotherapy, using mild electric shocks alongside hypnosis to treat hysteria, but soon discovered it was ineffective. Searching for answers, he turned to a new mentor, Joseph Breuer, the man who had once supported him financially during his student years and openly shared his ideas with him. One of these ideas came in the form of a remarkable case, Breuer's patient known as Anna O., whose real name was Bertha Pappenheim. Anna O. had fallen ill while caring for her father, a detail that would later prove crucial. She developed a series of puzzling symptoms: intense coughing fits, headaches, blurred vision, partial paralysis of her limbs, and even hallucinations. Breuer hypnotized her and encouraged her to speak freely about what troubled her. Astonishingly, as she expressed her worries and painful emotions under hypnosis, her symptoms disappeared. Anna deeply loved her father and was terrified of losing him. Because this fear was too overwhelming, she pushed it out of her conscious mind. But repressing it did not make it harmless. Instead, it continued to disturb her, manifesting as physical and psychological symptoms. Under hypnosis, Breuer and Freud found they could access these repressed memories and emotional wounds, allowing the symptoms to dissipate. This process of relieving distress by encouraging patients to speak openly about their hidden thoughts and feelings became known as the talking cure. Freud first relied on hypnosis, encouraging patients to tell their stories while in a hypnotic state. But the results were disappointing. Symptoms faded for a short time only to return later. Because the improvements were not lasting, he eventually abandoned hypnosis altogether. He then tried a new approach. He asked patients to close their eyes, pressed on their foreheads, and told them to say whatever they remembered. This, too, failed to produce real change. Only after every other method fell short did Freud begin experimenting with the technique that would later define his entire career. He simply invited patients to talk freely while he listened. This became known as free association. Patients agreed to say absolutely everything that came to mind, no matter how embarrassing, strange, childish, or private it seemed. Freud used a patient's past to explain their present. He believed that we are influenced by forces outside our conscious control, the unconscious, a part of the mind shaped by earlier experiences. These buried experiences and the way they influenced symptoms became his central focus. Freud thus committed himself to studying the unconscious. During a summer trip to the Alps with his family, Freud returned to one of his favorite places, a high mountain lake. Yet even in this peaceful setting, he remained preoccupied with his ongoing puzzle, the mystery of hysteria. One day, an 18-year-old girl approached him after recognizing his signature in a visitor's book. Freud referred to her as Katharina. She described intense symptoms: a tight, anxious pressure in her chest, choking sensations in her throat, shortness of breath, and dizziness. Freud immediately suspected hysteria. Her symptoms began after a deeply traumatic event. She walked in on her father having inappropriate relations with her sister, his own daughter. Even worse, she revealed that she herself had been forced into the same abuse when she was only 14. Simply talking to Freud brought her immense relief. Today we know that recovery requires much more than conversation alone. But at that time, Freud was convinced that talking itself could cure a person. This is why the method became known as the talking cure, a term often attributed to Anna O, who said talking cured her. Freud believed that speaking aloud about experiences a person had repressed was inherently therapeutic. Since he saw the root of the illness as torment caused by buried thoughts or trauma, bringing those hidden memories into conscious awareness was, in his view, the cure. Put simply, symptoms come from repressed thoughts and trauma, so the cure is to unrepress them, to move them from the unconscious into conscious awareness. Later, Freud realized that awareness alone was not enough for true healing. Transformation from the unconscious to the conscious was only the first step, not the complete solution. Freud and Breuer's friendship gradually deteriorated over one major point of disagreement: how to interpret their patients' sensitive early life experiences in connection to intercourse-related traumas, such as Katharina's experience. Freud meticulously recorded every detail of these experiences, believing that the root cause of hysteria could be traced back to early traumatic events involving themes that were extremely taboo in the 19th century, mostly connected to intercourse and related early traumas. Society at the time considered these topics inappropriate for public discussion, which reinforced Freud's belief that people would bury such painful memories deep in the unconscious. Breuer, on the other hand, wanted to avoid focusing on this area altogether. He felt that Freud was reducing the complexity of human experience to a single theme, and argued that Freud's view was too narrow. Freud, however, continued searching for one unifying explanation behind a wide range of psychological symptoms. This fundamental disagreement created a rift between them, and the two men never fully reconciled. That's it for today's episode and part 1 of our podcast on the life of Freud. Be sure to check out part 2 when it's released. We will dive even deeper and pick up right where we left off. Thank you for listening, and do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next part.